Abort the mission, Reed. That's an order. The command sliced through the static like a blade. Captain Sarah Reed froze, her gloved hand hovering over the throttle of her A-10 Thunderbolt II. Outside her canopy, the Afghan valley burned, a chaos of smoke, tracer rounds, and the dying light of dusk bleeding over the ridgeline. Command. I still have visual on the SEAL unit, she said, her voice tight. They're pinned and surrounded. Commander Hayes came back through the radio, his tone sharp, final. You're outnumbered. You're low on fuel. You get back to base, that's final. Sarah didn't reply. Her gaze drifted to the photo taped beside her HUD, a young man smiling in uniform. Her brother Daniel, killed 3 years ago during an extraction that was called off at the last minute. Tactical retreat, they called it, but to her it was abandonment. Now she could hear those same words again, echoing through her headset. Retreat, disengage, survive. But someone down there wouldn't survive if she obeyed. She took a slow breath. Copy that, she murmured into the mic, but her fingers never touched the controls to turn back. Through the rising smoke, she spotted movement, 5 heat signatures, taking cover behind what was left of a crumbling wall. Her targeting screen flickered. The enemy was closing in fast. Hang on, boys, she whispered, her eyes narrowing. I'm not leaving you. She muted her radio before Hayes could answer back. The silence felt heavy, like the pause before a storm. Sarah's heart thudded in rhythm with the A-10's engines. She reached for the armament switch, flicking it on. The cockpit vibrated as the GAU-8 Avenger cannon came alive, its steady hum like the growl of something ancient and angry. Let's finish this, she muttered. She pushed the throttle forward. The Warthog banked left, the horizon tilting as the valley below rushed toward her. Warnings flashed across her display. Low fuel, structural damage, enemy lock. She ignored everyone. Her eyes locked on target. She pressed the trigger. The cannon roared, thunder rolling across the mountains. Streams of depleted uranium rounds ripped through the enemy line, shredding vehicles and scattering fighters. The valley disappeared into dust and flame. Sarah pulled up hard, her chest pressed against the harness as G-forces clawed at her. Her breath came ragged, her hands trembling, but below the gunfire had gone silent. Then, through the static, a voice broke in. This is Alpha Team. Whoever's up there, you just saved our skins. A small smile touched her lips. Copy that, Alpha. I've got you on visual. Sit tight, but the relief was short-lived. Her radar lit up. 2 enemy aircraft inbound from the east, fast and closing. Damn it, she whispered, watching their blips appear on the scope. Her muted radio suddenly crackled again. Hayes's voice returned, this time shaking with anger. Reed, what the hell are you doing? You just disobeyed a direct order. She switched the channel calmly. Doing my job, sir. Your job is to stay alive. He barked. She glanced once more at her brother's photo taped to the console, the edges worn from time and sweat. Yeah, she whispered. I know. With a deep breath, she tightened her grip on the controls and turned toward the oncoming radar signals. Her fuel was low, her bird was wounded, but she wasn't done yet. Outside, the desert sky glowed orange as the A-10 roared upward again, alone against the fading sun. And for the first time in years, Captain Sarah Reed felt alive. The warning alarms screamed inside Sarah's cockpit as she leveled out above the ridge. The desert stretched endlessly ahead, painted red by the setting sun. 2 enemy MiG-29s appeared on her radar, closing fast from the east. 2 bandits inbound, she muttered, scanning the horizon. Her A-10 wasn't built for air-to-air combat. It was a tank killer, slow but brutal. Against MiGs, it was almost suicide. Down below, Alpha Team's radio crackled faintly in her headset. Eagle 2, we're surrounded again. 2 clicks south of the smoke. We've got wounded! Sarah's eyes flicked between the radar and the ground. Her training told her to climb, break contact, and regroup. Her gut told her something else. Copy Alpha, she said. Hold position. I'll clear you a path, she throttled back, keeping low. The A-10 hugged the terrain, weaving through canyons where radar couldn't track her. Dust kicked up in her wake. Her pulse thudded in her ears, steady and calm. In the command tent miles away, Commander Hayes stood over a map, eyes wide as he watched her signal disappear into the canyon. "She's going to get herself killed," he muttered. "Sir," an aide said quietly, "the SEALs are still transmitting." "She's keeping them alive." Hayes clenched his jaw. He didn't answer. Back in the cockpit, Sarah's voice softened as she switched to the SEALs frequency. "Alpha Team, this is Eagle 2. You've got 2 enemy aircraft inbound and ground forces pushing from the north. You've got 5 minutes to move." "Copy, Eagle," came the reply, breathless but steady. "We'll move when you give the word." Sarah banked hard right, rolling low beneath the ridge. Her HUD flickered with a lock warning. The MiGs had found her. "Let's dance," she whispered. She climbed fast, flares bursting behind her as the first missile screamed past, exploding harmlessly in the distance. The second came in tighter, faster. She rolled again, the G-force crushing her body. The missile tracked the heat of her engines, closing in until she cut power, dropping the A-10 like a stone. The missile streaked over her canopy and detonated ahead. A flash of orange against the fading light. Sarah yanked the throttle forward, engines roaring back to life. She spotted the first MiG cutting a wide arc, the second moving in behind her. "Come on, Reed, think," she muttered. Her eyes darted toward a jagged ridgeline ahead. An idea formed. Dangerous, stupid, perfect. She dove into the canyon, rock walls rushing past on either side. The MiG followed, confident in its speed. Too confident. Sarah cut her throttle, letting the A-10 drop lower, closer to the ground. The enemy fighter screamed in after her, its nose gun spitting rounds that tore through the canyon walls. At the last second, she pulled up sharply and released a flare burst. The MiG's missile chased the heat signature straight into the rock face. The explosion lit up the canyon like a sunburst. Sarah's chest heaved. One down, the second MiG was still out there. She didn't have the speed or altitude to fight it. Her radar beeped again, ground units closing in on Alpha Team. "Can't save them both," she whispered, glancing between the radar blips and the smoke rising from the valley floor. Then she heard it, gunfire over the open comm. Shouts, the unmistakable sound of men being overrun. Decision made. She banked hard toward the valley, ignoring the approaching MiG. "Alpha, I'm coming in low. Mark your position with smoke." "Negative, Eagle!" "You'll draw fire. Just do it." Seconds later, a red flare cut through the haze. Sarah lined up her sights, every muscle tense. Her brother's voice echoed in her memory. "If you can save them, you go." She pressed the trigger. The cannon thundered again, tearing through the enemy line closing on the SEALs. Vehicles erupted in flame. The MiG's shadow swept over her, locking on for the kill. Sarah didn't flinch. She stayed on target, emptying the last of her ammunition into the valley below, the radio filled with shouts. "Eagle 2, that's it? They're falling back?" "You did it." But Sarah couldn't answer. The missile warning tone shrieked, long and steady. She looked up at the horizon. "One MiG, one missile." "No time." She whispered a prayer and pulled hard on the stick. The sky turned white. The explosion lit up the valley like a sunrise. The shockwave rippled across the desert, rolling through dust and smoke until it reached the ground troops below. "Eagle 2's hit!" someone shouted over the comms. Lieutenant Mason, leader of Alpha Team, dropped to one knee behind a burnt-out truck, eyes scanning the burning sky. A black plume trailed down through the clouds, her A-10 spinning, pieces breaking off as it fell toward the ridgeline. "God, no," he muttered. "She was right above us." "Do we have her shoot?" another SEAL yelled. Mason's heart pounded. He adjusted his binoculars, searching desperately through the smoke. Nothing, just fire and falling debris. Then, faintly, one white blossom against the dark sky. "Shoot! I got her, shoot!" Relief swept through the team, but only for a moment. The canopy drifted toward a canyon 1/2 mile east, straight into enemy territory. Mason keyed his radio. "Command, this is Alpha Team. Eagle 2 is down. I repeat, pilot is down. We're moving to recover." Hayes's voice came through, cold but shaken. "Negative, Alpha. You are to hold position until reinforcements arrive." Mason gritted his teeth. "By then she's dead, sir." "That's an order, Lieutenant." The radio went silent. Mason looked at his men, mud-caked, exhausted, bleeding. Every one of them nodded. He switched channels. "Alpha team, form up, we're going after her." They moved fast, darting between cover, climbing the rocky slope under the glow of burning wreckage. The air smelled of metal and dust. Above them, fragments of the A-10 still smoked where they'd landed. "Can't believe she came back for us," muttered Rodriguez, the youngest of the group. Mason didn't answer. He remembered her voice on the radio. Calm, steady, fearless. She'd saved them. Now it was their turn. Sarah drifted in and out of consciousness. The world tilted and swayed around her, the parachute tangled in a scraggly tree above. She was hanging 10 feet off the ground, helmet cracked, oxygen mask half torn. Her left arm burned. She tried to move. Pain shot through her ribs. Something was broken. "Come on, Sarah," she whispered to herself. "Not here, not like this." She reached for her survival knife, cutting the straps. The fall knocked the air out of her lungs, but she forced herself to crawl toward the shadows of the canyon wall. Through the ringing in her ears, she could hear distant gunfire. The enemy was closing in. Sarah pulled her sidearm, checking the magazine, half full. She pressed herself against the rocks, breathing shallowly, then faintly a familiar sound. The static crackle of a radio. "This is Alpha Team, we're inbound to your location, hang on." Her throat tightened. She pressed the transmit button, her voice hoarse. "Copy. Visual on flare. Canyon Ridge." "Roger that, Eagle. We're coming." She dropped the radio, relief flooding her for a heartbeat, before the sound of boots echoed down the canyon. Not friendly. 3 enemy soldiers emerged from the haze, rifles sweeping. Sarah flattened herself against the dirt, pulse hammering. Her vision blurred, but her instincts took over. She steadied her weapon. The first soldier came into view. She fired once. He dropped. The others scattered for cover, shouting. She rolled behind a boulder, gasping through the pain, bullets sparking against stone. Her sidearm clicked empty. She reached for another mag, hands trembling. Only one left. Then voices closer, English this time. "Eagle! Eagle! You copy!" Mason appeared from the smoke, rifle up. The SEALs opened fire, taking down the last 2 enemies in seconds. "Pilot secured!" someone yelled. Sarah slumped back against the rocks, her helmet slipping off. Mason knelt beside her, eyes wide. "You're one hell of a stubborn pilot, ma'am." She managed a weak smile. "Guess I don't follow orders too well." He laughed under his breath, then glanced up the canyon. More gunfire echoed in the distance. The enemy wasn't done. Mason turned to his team. "We move now. Extraction point is 2 clicks west." He helped Sarah to her feet, her weight leaning against him. The canyon behind them burned, and the sound of helicopters began to rise somewhere far away. They were alive for now. But the night was far from over. The night swallowed the canyon in black silence. Only the sound of boots crunching over stone and the steady rasp of breathing broke the stillness. Captain Sarah Reed limped beside Lieutenant Mason, her left arm pressed tight against her ribs. Every step sent fire through her side. She could smell the burned metal of her flight suit and the faint copper tang of blood. "Extraction point's 2 clicks west," Mason whispered. "We follow the creek bed. Low ground keeps us off their radar." Sarah nodded weakly, her flashlight switched off. The moon hung high and pale, glinting off the shattered ridgeline where her A-10 had gone down. In the distance, the occasional thud of mortars echoed, enemy patrols searching for survivors. Rodriguez, the youngest SEAL, took point, scanning ahead with night vision. "Movement up front," he murmured. 2 tangos, maybe 3. Mason raised a hand, signaling halt. The team melted into the shadows. Sarah crouched low, every muscle tense. She could hear the enemy voices, foreign, harsh, echoing off the rocks. Flashlights cut through the dark, slicing across the canyon walls. Mason gestured to his men, silent and precise. 2 SEALs flanked left, another right. Within seconds, muffled gunfire popped through the night. 3 bodies hit the dirt. "All clear." Rodriguez whispered. They pressed forward. Sarah's breath grew shallow. The pain in her side was worse now. Each inhale a knife. She stumbled, catching herself on the canyon wall. Mason turned quickly, gripping her arm. "You good?" "I'm fine," she lied, forcing herself upright. "Keep moving." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. There wasn't time to argue. They reached the creek bed, its surface reflecting shards of moonlight. The extraction zone lay beyond the next ridge, open ground. "Too open. Command says choppers are 5 minutes out," Mason whispered, "but we'll need to hold the LZ." 5 minutes? Sarah managed a faint smirk. "That's a lifetime out here." Rodriguez chuckled softly. "Guess we'll make it count." They spread out along the ridge, taking positions behind rocks and brush. Sarah knelt near Mason, checking the small pistol she'd recovered from her vest. "Not much ammo left," she muttered. "Then make it count." The first crack of a rifle split the silence. A flare burst overhead, bathing the canyon in red light. Shadows moved on the far slope, dozens of them. "Contact front," Mason barked. Bullets tore through the night. The SEALs returned fire, their muzzle flashes lighting the ridge like lightning strikes. Sarah dropped low, steadying her breathing, firing controlled bursts. Each shot sent a jolt through her ribs, but she ignored the pain. The enemy advanced fast. Too many. Mason shouted over the gunfire, "Eagle! When those birds arrive, we'll mark the zone with smoke. Stay behind cover!" Sarah glanced skyward, searching for the distant thump of rotors. Nothing yet. A grenade exploded nearby, showering them with dirt. Rodriguez cursed, dragging a wounded teammate behind a rock. 2 minutes! Mason yelled. Sarah's vision blurred. The noise, the heat, the smell of smoke. It all merged into a single pulse of chaos. Her hands moved on instinct, reloading, firing, ducking. Then she heard it, the deep, rhythmic beat of helicopter blades. "Eagle. Well, this is Hawk 2. We've got visual on your smoke." Mason grabbed a red flare, struck it, and hurled it into the clearing. The light flared bright crimson against the dark. "Move! Move!" he shouted. The SEALs formed a defensive arc as the Black Hawk dropped into the clearing, rotors whipping sand and debris into a storm. Sarah felt Mason's hand on her shoulder. "You first, Captain." She hesitated, glancing back toward the canyon. Dozens of muzzle flashes still flickered in the distance. "For what it's worth," Mason shouted over the noise, "you didn't just save my team. You saved your soul tonight." She gave a faint smile, gripping his arm. "Let's finish this." Together they sprinted through the chaos toward the chopper, gunfire chasing their heels. The night roared around them, alive with fury and fire, and above the noise, Sarah swore she could still hear her A-10's engines in the wind, steady, defiant, unbroken. The wind howled through the base airfield as dawn broke over the desert. A pale orange light bled across the hangars, catching on the bent remains of a once proud A-10 wing that had been recovered from the canyon. It stood there now like a monument to something fierce and unyielding. Captain Sarah Reed sat on a stretcher beside the med tent, a bandage wrapped tight across her ribs, her flight suit torn and dust-stained. Her face was pale, but her eyes, those steady, storm-grey eyes, were alive. The SEALs had made it back. Every one of them. Mason approached quietly, holding 2 cups of coffee. He handed her one and sat beside her. For a long time, neither spoke. The hum of generators filled the silence. Finally, Mason said, "We read the after-action report. Command's not happy." Sarah gave a dry laugh that turned into a cough. "They never are when someone breaks the rules." "You didn't just break them," he said. "You rewrote them." She smiled faintly, staring at the horizon. "You'd have done the same." Mason sipped his coffee, nodding. "Maybe, but not everyone would have had the guts." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You saved 6 men, Captain. That's not something anyone can write off." Before she could answer, Commander Hayes appeared. His face was hard, but the lines around his eyes seemed deeper than before. He walked up slowly, his shadow falling across them. "Lieutenant, give us a moment," Hayes said. Mason nodded, stood, and walked away. Hayes stood silent for a beat, then let out a tired breath. "You disobeyed a direct order." Sarah didn't look up. "Yes, sir. You put your aircraft at risk. You compromised protocol, comms, and extraction timing." "Also, yes, sir." He stared at her, jaw working, the anger in his face slowly fading into something else, reluctant respect. "And yet, you brought my men home." Sarah finally met his eyes. "They were already home, sir. They just needed a way back." For a moment neither spoke. The only sound was the wind tugging at the torn flag above the hangar. Hayes sighed. "You'll face review. You might lose your wings, you know that." She nodded. "Yes, sir." He hesitated. Then, almost in a whisper, said, "If I were in that cockpit, I might have done the same." Sarah blinked, caught off guard. Hayes gave her a curt nod and turned to leave, but paused mid-step. "Get some rest, Captain. You earned it." When he was gone, Sarah looked down at her hands, scarred, trembling slightly. She thought of the flames, the roar of the cannon, the moment she'd made her choice. Somewhere deep inside, the doubt still flickered. Did she do the right thing? Or had she just delayed the inevitable? Then she felt something pressed into her palm. Mason stood beside her again, holding a small piece of metal, the A-10's data plate, recovered from the wreckage. "Figured this belonged to you," he said quietly. Sarah turned it over in her fingers, tracing the etched numbers, the scratches, the marks of battle. "She was a good bird," she murmured. Damn right she was. They sat in silence as the sun rose higher, light spilling across the base. The morning was calm now, the kind of quiet that comes after the storm. Sarah looked toward the sky, where a formation of A-10s roared overhead, their engines echoing across the desert. Mason followed her gaze. "Think they'll ever understand?" "Why you did it?" Sarah smiled softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "They don't have to. The ones who needed me already do." The sound of engines faded into the distance. Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of the sun on her face. Somewhere in that endless sky, her old Warthog lived on, a symbol of defiance, of duty, and of a promise kept. And for the first time in years, she felt peace.